At CPAC Texas this past weekend, Congressman Scott Perry detailed the work he was doing and what he wanted conservative activists to do to combat the progressive left. Perry, a hardline Pennsylvania conservative, went on a tear against Democrats as well as anti-Trump Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Days later, Perry would claim that FBI agents had confronted him and seized his cell phone, just a day after federal agents searched former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence. Perry is a key congressional ally of Trump and has alleged unfair treatment of the former president and conservatives by federal law enforcement, stating, quote, "These kinds of banana republic tactics should concern every citizen."
Common Sense America. This segment, I looked at my notes, is called "The Solution to What the Democrats, What the Left is Doing to the Country." The solution, right? I'll tell you, you know what the solution is. Like, stop it. End it. That's the solution. I am Congressman Scott Perry from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. If you've never heard of the House Freedom Caucus, members of Congress who stand for the countless millions of Americans who feel like Washington has left them behind and does not speak for them. That's who the Freedom Caucus is. Now, what we're going to talk about this afternoon is, because what we constantly hear is when Republicans are in charge, well, we can't get that done because the Democrats are in the presidency. We can't get that done because the Democrats have the Senate, or there's always some reason, right? And of course we can't get it done when we're in the minority, because we're in the minority and they're in charge of everything. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not true. We're going to talk about three things. Number one, you got to know which team you're on. Got to know which team you're on. And I'm going to give you examples of each one of these. You got to know what the rules are of the game. It's not really a game. This is real stuff, but you got to know what the rules are of the operation. And you got to know the leverage points. Got to know the leverage points. Okay, so that's the three things we're going to talk about. And the Freedom Caucus has engaged in every single one of these things and been moderately successful. We're still in the minority, so these are little wins, but this is training for the big wins that we can have when we're in the majority. And quite honestly, even in the minority, we can be doing some things to win for the American people. So front and center, the National Defense Authorization Act. We're going to talk about a leverage point. National Defense Authorization, that's where we spend the money and figure out the policy for your military that you pay for. The military that has been humiliated over and over again by the left, right? So our side brings us this bill. And they say, this is a good bill, we want you to vote for it. Our side brings us this. Understand, the Democrats cannot pass this bill on their own. They don't have enough votes. You already know this. Many Democrats hate our military. They hate what it stands for. They hate what the country stands for. They don't have the votes to pass it, so they have to come to us. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what that is? That is a leverage point. You need me. And if you need me, I'm going to need some things from you. So our side brought it to us and said, this is a good bill. A bunch of us in the Freedom Caucus looked at it and said, this is a terrible bill. You know what the Democrats' solution is to the woes that they're imposing on the military? Drafting our daughters. Right? That's one of their solutions. The Freedom Caucus said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're going to take an official position. We're going to let the world know. We're going to let everybody know, and then you're going to call your representative, your senator, and you're going to say, do not vote for that. And it's exactly what happened. And they took that out of the bill. That's a small win, but it's a win. In the same bill, vax mandates, you know that we're recruiting below 50% right now. Can't replace people in the military because imposing the vaccines, right? So we got Senator Lee. He went to leadership over there and said, we need a bill, a standalone bill to end the vaccines before we vote on the NDAA. Now listen to the math here. Listen to the math. So 7 senators did not show up for the vote. 4 Republican, okay? 46 Republicans voted yes. 47 Democrats voted no. We lost by 1. Lost by 1. 2 of those 4 Republicans that didn't show up were there earlier in the day. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a leverage point. You got to know who your team is, and you got to be in the fight. We could have won by 1. We could have won by 1 if we were in the fight. You know this, and I know this. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But we can win. We can win if we fight, if we're willing to fight. Let's move on to the next one. We're in the great state of Texas. We're in the great state of Texas. So the red flag law that came out of the Senate and came to the House of Representatives, Senator Cornyn, not only, look, we understand that sometimes you got a bad vote, you know, you got you get a bad situation, you got to vote on something. But don't help them write the bill and don't co-sponsor the bill, right? So that's what happened. Senator Cornyn does that, and a bunch of Republican senators follow him on this thing, this red flag law that takes away your right to due process. And then it comes to the House. And then House members say, well, look, a bunch of Republican senators voted for this, so this must be okay. And our leadership says to us, well, we're going to recommend a no vote. Recommend a no vote? Whose side are you on? Whose team are you on? So Freedom Caucus says, no, 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 no. We want you to whip against it and let the American people know this is an awful bill. They finally came around. They finally came around and ripped again. It's a small victory, but it's a victory, and we can win some of these things. Now, we lost a few, right? Adam Kinzinger voted yes. Liz Cheney voted yes. They're not coming back. Adam Kinzinger not coming back, and Liz Cheney's going to lose in about a week and a half, right? Leverage and knowing what team you're on, all right? Speaking of Liz Cheney, 2 years ago, the House Freedom Caucus went to our leadership and said, she's got to go. She does not speak for us. She's coming out against Republican members because she disagrees with their votes. She's got to go. We tried to force a vote. And our leadership said we should be honored to have Liz Cheney in our conference leading us. That's what they said, right? We brought it back in February of 2021, brought the issue back. And our leadership went out and got the votes, 145 extra votes for her to stay the conference chair. What, 3 months later? 3 months later, she was voting for impeachment and working with the Democrats setting up the J6 committee. We finally got our leadership to kick her off that leadership position. You can get small victories, but you got to have some leverage and you got to be willing to fight. That's what has to happen. So we talked about leverage, talked about knowing what team you're on, knowing what team you're on. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody that runs for Congress, they ran because they knew something was messed up in Washington. They know the same thing you know, right? They didn't go there to do the same things over and over again, yet that's what happens. That's exactly what happens. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the rules of the operation and what we can do, because we've got some things coming up. So we have rules in the House of Representatives that we operate by. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, has instituted what's called martial law. So she can bring a bill to the floor, never gone through committee, no notice on the day you're going to vote on it. And she does that kind of stuff. I got a news flash for you. Our side would like to do the same thing as well, because what they want you to have is what you have now, which is the illusion of representative government. The illusion of representative. You think your representative's going to Washington, D.C. on your behalf, and she's working on the bills, and they're up late at night working on the language and changing some things and all this stuff. Not happening. Not happening. Here's how it goes. The Republican ranking member gets together with the chairman, the Democrat chairman in the House, and they get together with the chairman and the ranking member in the Senate, and they work out what's called a four corners deal. Four corners deal. You're not involved. Here's where you get involved. They bring it to the floor, and then they come to you and they say, we need you to vote. We need you to vote on this, and there's an agreement. There's an agreement in place. And if you're a Freedom Caucus member, whose name is Perry, you say, well, Mr. Chairman, I don't have an agreement. I wasn't in the room. So I'm going to have to be no on the bill. And that's where the problems start. Ladies and gentlemen, the rules are important. Here's what we have coming up, right? So we talked a little bit about what has happened. We're going to come back in September. The Democrats don't have the votes to pass the appropriations, how we spend your money. They don't have the votes. You know what that means? We got a leverage point, right? What we can't have, what we cannot have is Republicans voting for that, because here's what they're going to want to do. They know the cavalry's coming because you're sending them, right? Just over the horizon, here comes the Republican Party new representatives coming. You saw some of them out here on the floor, on the stage, right? They're coming. The Democrats are going to say, do a continuing resolution, be with us on this, into, I don't know, let's say December. Now, what's going to happen on November 8th? They're all going to lose their election, and Republicans are going to take over. But they're still going to be in office until they get sworn in January. It's called the lame duck session. And then they're going to pass something horrific that we're going to have to deal with into the next year, spending and policy. Republicans cannot help them. Cannot help them. That's the leverage point. In September, we have to say no. You people wanted the majority. God bless you, you have it. You pass it without our help. You pass it. Republicans cannot cave in on this leverage point. What it takes is courage. Simple word, it's courage. Ladies and gentlemen, the rules. You're going to see in about a month or so, you're going to start hearing about the rules of how we conduct business. How we conduct business in the House. And I talked to you a little bit about martial law and all those things. So what we're going to ask for, and we need Republicans to vote for this so that they can participate, so they don't have to take orders from leadership. Because you know who their leadership is? It's the citizenry. Not who's elected in Congress for leadership, not Liz Cheney, citizenry. So the rules would be, I'll give you just a couple examples. The majority of the majority. Any bill that we bring to the floor, any bill at all, has to have the majority of the majority. The Republicans are in the majority. If you can't get majority of Republican support for it, you can't run it. And you'd say to yourself, well, of course, that's obvious. Ladies and gentlemen, I served under John Boehner. I served under Paul Ryan. I can't tell you how many times they couldn't get the votes on the Republican side, so they went to the Democrats, and more of them voted for it than we did, and they will sell us out. We got to put that in the rules, ladies and gentlemen. It has to be in the rules. How about this? 72 hours to read a bill. It's in the rules right now. We waive it all the time. You know, when you just waive it. We say that doesn't matter anymore, and we just move the bills right to the floor. We want 72 hours. You know what? We want to read it. You know the other reason? We want you to read it. We want you to see it. We want to talk to you about what's happened. 72 hours, not waiverable, only in the case of emergency, with 3/4 of the conference agreeing that this is an emergency. And an emergency isn't, we want to run the bill before you've all read it. That can't be the emergency. And then finally, one that I really like, oversight. Oversight. We must conduct oversight, robust oversight. There's no reason that Jim Jordan shouldn't be peeling open the DOJ, shouldn't be peeling open Hunter Biden, shouldn't be peeling open the January 6th committee. There's no reason the committee I sit on, the Foreign Affairs Committee, isn't looking at Ukraine and Joe Biden and China. And finally, a thing called the Holman Rule, the Holman Rule. You're not familiar with it. I know this is inside baseball, but I just want you to get that in your mind because it allows members of Congress to strike out spending provisions one by one. And you know the other thing it does? It allows us to look at bureaucrats that work in the administration that we can't fire and take their salary down to $1. Now, I'm thinking Anthony Fauci, right? I'm thinking about Merrick Garland. I'm thinking about the Homeland Security Secretary. They can continue to work. We can't fire him, but they should make $1. Ladies and gentlemen, we can fight if we win. We can win if we fight, right? We can win if we fight, but we've got to fight. Leverage points, you got to be on the same team. You got to know the rules. God bless you. Let's save the republic.